Hi, this is NextGen Picks. You know the dream, that IMAX at home fantasy. You measure the wall, talk your spouse into it, drag a 98-inch beast into the living room, and then you power it on, only to find that instead of deep, inky black space, you're staring at gray soup. That's the nightmare of the budget giant TV. It's the dirty secret manufacturers never print on the box. Massive screens amplify every single flaw. For years, if you wanted a display this big that didn't look completely washed out, you had to drop $15,000, maybe even $20,000. It was a rich man's game. But right now, that game is finished. I've spent the last month testing a TV that doesn't just undercut the legacy brands, it takes a sledgehammer to their entire pricing structure. We're talking flagship level performance for the price of a used sedan. But I'll be straight with you. There's a catch. Actually, there are 3 very specific catches around panel lotteries and shipping that you need to know before you hit that buy button. If you appreciate honest, wallet-protecting reviews that don't bend to corporate sponsors, do me a huge favor. Hit that like button and subscribe to NextGen Picks. It keeps the lights on and keeps us independent. Now let's look at the monster that just ruined Sony's day. Okay, let's rewind the clock for just a second. 3 years ago, if you wanted a 100-inch screen, you bought a projector. That was the rule. You bought a projector, you bought blackout curtains, you turned your living room into a cave, and you pretended to be happy about it. You told your friends, "Oh, the cinematic look is so authentic," while you were secretly squinting because a stray sunbeam hit the screen and washed out the entire third act of the Batman. Projectors are great, don't get me wrong, but they are a fragile ecosystem. They need darkness. They need silence. But TVs are blunt instruments. They fight the sun and win. For the last decade, the industry had this invisible wall at 85 in. You could get an 85-inch panel, but if you wanted to go bigger, you were entering the realm of custom installers and 5-figure checks. Manufacturers told us it's impossible to ship glass that big without breaking it, or the yields are too low. Well, spoiler alert, they were lying. Or at least they were comfortable because something shifted in the supply chain about 18 months ago. A massive surplus of Gen 10.5 LCD glass sheets flooded out of factories in China, specifically from CSAT. That's the manufacturing arm of TCL. Suddenly the math changed. It became cheaper to cut one giant 98-inch slab than to cut smaller ones that nobody was buying. So, here we are. The floodgates are open. The era of the 5-figure giant screen is dead. And that brings us to the heavyweight champion, the reason we are even making this video, the TCL QM8 51G, or just the QM8 if you don't want to sound like a barcode scanner. Now, usually when a price drops this hard, you assume corners were cut. You assume it's a budget panel, 60 Hz edge-lit trash that looks like a murky gray window. But this is weird. On paper, this TV shouldn't exist at this price point. We're talking about mini LED technology, not standard LED, mini LED. That means thousands of tiny diodes behind the screen, specifically 5,000 dimming zones, 5,000. To give you context, the high-end TV you bought 4 years ago might have had, 40 zones, maybe 100. This has 5,000 separate areas where it can turn the light off completely. Why does that matter? Because on a screen this size, blooming is the enemy. You know what I'm talking about. That ugly gray halo that surrounds a bright object in a dark scene, like when white text appears on a black background and it looks like it's smudged. On a 65-inch TV, it's annoying. On a 98-inch TV, that halo is the size of a dinner plate. It destroys the immersion. It reminds you that you're watching a TV. So, I put the QM8 through the torture test. I ran the interstellar docking scene, I ran the Vegas night flyover demo, and honestly, it's terrifyingly good. The local dimming algorithm here is aggressive. It slams those blacks down to absolute zero. Is it OLED perfect? No. If you're a pixel peeping purist sitting 3 feet away, you will see some minor suppression of tiny stars. But from 8FT away on a couch, it looks like a window into deep space. And then there's the brightness. Look at this meter. That is 5,000 nits of peak brightness. That is not bright. That is industrial hazard bright. That is squint when there's an explosion bright. Most cinema projectors tap out at maybe 100 or 200 nits. This is 25 times brighter. What does that mean for you? It means you don't need the blackout curtains. You can watch football on Sunday afternoon with the windows wide open, sun streaming in, and the picture still punches through the glare. It dominates the room. It's actually so bright that during my late night testing, I had to turn the backlight down to 30% because it was physically fatiguing my eyes. That is a good problem to have. But hold on, put the credit card down. I told you I'm not here to sell you a dream. I'm here to tell you the truth. And the truth is, physics is still physics. This TV uses a VA panel, vertical alignment. That's how it gets those deep blacks. But the trade-off is the viewing angle. Look at the shot. When I sit dead center, it's glorious. But watch what happens when I move just one seat over to the love seat on the side. The colors shift. That Ferrari red turns into a salmon pink. The contrast washes out. If you have a wide living room, like a really wide setup where people are sitting way off to the sides, the person on the end is having a strictly okay experience. They aren't seeing what you're seeing in the captain's chair. This is a me first DV. It prioritizes the person in the middle. And then there's the heat. Nobody talks about this in the press release. This thing is basically a giant radiator. After 2 hours of HDR gaming, the screen itself was radiating heat you could feel from 3 feet away. In a small enclosed media room, it will raise the ambient temperature. In the winter, great. In the summer, you better hope your AC is up to the task. It pulls power and it expels heat. It's big, dumb energy physics. For the gamers, this is your end game. I plugged in my PC. I plugged in the PS5. 144 Hz refresh rate on a screen. This size feels illegal. Usually when you go this big, input lag goes through the roof. You move the stick, and half a second later, the camera turns. It feels like driving a boat. Not here. The input lag is virtually non-existent. Playing a first-person shooter on a surface area larger than a ping pong table is disorienting at first. Then it becomes addictive. You see snipers in the distance. That would be a pixel on a normal monitor. So, is the QM8 the perfect TV? No. The processing, the upscaling when you're watching low bitrate cable news or old 720p YouTube videos is good, not great. It can look a little noisy, a little digital. Sony still wins there, and we'll get to that. But for the price, for the sheer giant killer value, it is the current king. Now, before we move on to the TV that's trying to steal TCL's lunch money, I need to ask you something. I'm seeing a massive divide in the comments lately. Half of you want me to review these giant budget screens, and the other half are screaming for high-end OLED monitors. So, pause for a second. Go down to the comments right now. Tell me, what is the one piece of tech you are actually scared to buy right now because the reviews are too confusing? Is it a robot vacuum, a specific soundbar? Let me know. I read those and I build the schedule based on what you need, not what the brands send me. Okay, let's talk about the rival. Enter the Hisense U8 series, specifically the 100 U8K, or depending on when you're watching this, the U8N refresh. Hisense and TCL are locked in a death match. They are the Godzilla and Kong of the Chinese manufacturing world, and they are fighting over your living room wall. Usually the Hisense is priced within $100 of the TCL. Sometimes it's cheaper. And on the spec sheet, it looks like a carbon copy. Mini LED, quantum dot, 144 Hz, thousands of zones. You might look at them and think, NextGen pics, it's the same TV with a different logo. It's not. The difference is in the brain, the processing. Hisense approaches the image differently. Out of the box, the Hisense tends to be a little more vibrant, maybe even oversaturated. It pops, it screams, "Look at me." The skin tones are a bit richer, sometimes pushing a little too red. But here is where the giant killer narrative gets complicated. Hisense has historically had a bit more trouble with what we call motion handling. In fast panning shots, think hockey, football, or an action movie camera whip. I noticed ghosting, a red trail. It's subtle, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. However, Hisense has one ace up its sleeve: features. They tend to support everything. Dolby Vision IQ, IMAX Enhanced, HDR10+. If there is a format, they support it. The TCL supports most, but Hisense is like the Swiss Army knife, and for some reason the Hisense upscaling, taking that grainy 1080p cable feed and stretching it to 100 and felt slightly softer, slightly more organic than the TCL. The TCL tries to sharpen everything, which can make old video look gritty. The Hisense smooths it out. So here's the split. If you are a gamer, stick with the TCL. The response time feels snappier. If you're a movie watcher who streams a lot of Netflix and maybe watches cable sports, the Hisense might be the better play, provided you win the lottery. And yeah, we have to talk about the lottery, the panel lottery. This applies to both brands, but I see it mentioned in my Discord regarding Hisense more often. When you manufacture glass this big, consistency is a nightmare. I've seen two identical Hisense units side by side. One had a pristine uniform gray screen. The other looked like it had dirty clouds floating behind the glass. We call it dirty screen effect, or DSE. When the camera pans across a blue sky or a green football field, those dirty spots stay static. It looks like the screen is smudgy. If you buy the Hisense or the TCL, frankly, you need to check this immediately. Put up a gray slide. Look for the smudges. If it's bad, send it back. Do not live with it. You paid thousands of dollars. Make them give you a clean one. One logistical nightmare to note before we look at the premium options: the feet. On both of these giant killer budget models, the feet are at the far edges of the screen. You need a media console that is nearly 8 ft wide. Most people don't have that. You're going to be looking at third-party pedestal stands or wall mounting. And wall mounting a 190 lb TV, that is not a Saturday afternoon DIY project. That is a call a contractor and find the studs before you kill someone project. But let's say you don't want to play the lottery. Let's say you have the budget, and you don't just want big and bright. You want cinema perfect. You want the brand that Hollywood directors actually use as reference monitors. Well, you're going to have to pay the Sony tax. This is where the conversation shifts from value to fidelity. The Sony 98X9L or the Bravia 9 if you have money to burn. But let's stick to the X9L because it's the realistic competitor here. Now look at the specs. If you just read the box, the Sony loses. It has fewer dimming zones than the TCL. It's not as bright as the QM8, it costs more. On paper, it's a bad deal. But you don't watch paper, you watch a picture. And Sony has a secret weapon that TCL and Hisense haven't been able to reverse engineer yet. The XR processor. This chip is doing math that the others aren't. It understands depth. It understands texture. When you watch a movie on the Sony, the background separation looks 3D. The skin tones look human, not LED human. The motion is liquid. I watched Dune Part 2 on the TCL, and it was impressive because it was huge and bright. I watched it on the Sony, and it looked like film. The grain was preserved, not scrubbed away. The shadows had detail, not just black crush. If you're the type of person who gets annoyed when a soap opera effect makes a movie look like a video game, the Sony is your only safe harbor in the 98 and Storm. It respects the frame rate. It respects the director's intent. But is that respect worth an extra $2,000? That is the question that keeps me up at night, because that extra $2,000 could buy you a killer sound system. And let me tell you, you are going to need a sound system. Do not, I repeat, do not use the built-in speakers on these things. They sound like a smartphone trapped in a cardboard box. So, we have the brute force king TCL, the features gambler Hisense, and the cinema snob Sony. But there's a fourth option, an option that usually sits in the corner, forgotten until you see the price tag and do a double take. It's the budget option, the one for the sports bars and the people who just want size without the bells and whistles. But buying this next one might be the biggest mistake you can make. And I'm going to show you exactly why in a second, because the drop off in quality isn't a slope, it's a cliff. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. You're looking at your bank account and you're looking at the TCL QM8 or the Sony and you're thinking, NextGen picks, $3,000 is still a lot of money. And then you scroll down Amazon and you see it. The TCL S5 or maybe a Samsung Crystal UHD model, they are massive. They're 98 in and they are under $2,000. It feels like a loophole. It feels like you found a glitch in the matrix. Let me be very clear. This is a trap. These entry-level giants, the S5, the U76, the budget Samsungs, they are missing the one thing that makes a 98 in TV livable. Local dimming. They don't have those 5,000 zones. They usually have 0. The entire backlight is just on. When you stretch a backlight across a surface area this big without zone control, you don't get contrast. You get IPS glow. You get gray soup. Watching a movie on this at night is depressing. It's like watching TV through a dirty window. And the motion, most of these are stuck at 60 Hz. On a 55-inch TV, 60 Hz is fine. On a 98-inch wall, when the camera pans, the entire room feels like it's vibrating. The blur is magnified. If you buy one of these for a sports bar where the lights are always on and nobody's paying attention, fine, go for it. But for a home theater, you will regret it every single time the lights go down. Okay, you say, I don't want budget trash. I want the best. I want Samsung. Enter the Samsung 98 QN90D. This is the premium all-rounder. It has the best anti-reflective coating in the business. If you have a room with 50 windows and no curtains, this is the only TV that fights the sun and wins without turning into a mirror. It's brighter than the Sony. It has better processing than the TCL. But then you look at the price tag. Depending on the sale, it is often double, sometimes triple the price of the TCL QM8. Is it 3 times the TV? Absolutely not. It is maybe 10% better, 15%. This is the Samsung tax. You are paying for the name, the ecosystem, and that Tizen OS interface that, let's be honest, has become a billboard for ads. Unless you have unlimited budget, the math just doesn't work here. So we have a clear battlefield. We have the giant killer, the features gambler, the cinema snob, and the budget trap. Who are you? If you are a cinema purist, if you watch Criterion Collection discs, if you care about grain structure and natural motion, and you have the budget, buy the X90L. It is the adult in the room. It respects the art. It will make your cable box look better than it has any right to. If you are a gamer, or you just want the most insane window-shattering brightness for your dollar, buy the TCL QM8. It is 95% of the performance of a $10,000 TV for $3,000. It is the most fun you can have with your clothes on. If you're thinking about the budget S5, don't. Just buy a really nice 85-in instead. Trust me, quality over quantity. But before you click those links, I need to drop a truth bomb on you. A 98-inch TV is not an asset. It is a liability. You cannot move it. If you move apartments, this TV does not fit in your car. It does not fit in a U-Haul van easily. It does not fit in an elevator. Once you install this, it lives there until it dies or you sell the house. And depreciation, brutal. Next year, these will be cheaper. The year after, even cheaper. Do not buy this as an investment. Buy it because you want to experience Dune the way it was meant to be seen. Right now, tonight, I've linked the specific batch versions of the QM8 and the X90L down below. These are the updated SKUs that solve some of the early firmware bugs we talked about. If you use those links, it helps the channel and it keeps you safe from the old stock. Enjoy the giant screen, invite the neighbors over, charge them admission. This is NextGen Picks, and I'll see you in the next